Earlier this week, a Quebec Innu band accused Nalcor of cutting and pasting research from a Texan oil and gas exploration manual into an environmental impact statement for the Lower Churchill. The Iqaluit Innu say they discovered that sections of Nalcor's report on transmission lines were strikingly similar to a report prepared for an organization in Houston, Texas. Well, David Schultz is a lawyer who represents the Innu band, and he joins me on the phone this morning. David, good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
Can you explain your client's initial concerns about the effect of the Lower Churchill development on salmon migration?
Well, the Innu of Iqaluit, while they traditionally go up into Labrador, their reserve is on the Lower St. Lawrence, near the mouth of the Labrador River, and they've, as your listeners probably know, they've already taken a stand on the proposed dams, but now Nalcor is doing its environmental assessment of the lines, the transmission lines that will go from Muskrat Falls to the Strait of Belle Isle, and then the cable that will go under the strait and through Conception Bay onto the island of Newfoundland. The concern they have is about that cable is that that's where the Atlantic salmon that spawn in the Romaine River, that's where they migrate through. So they said very early on that they wanted to know what effects the cable would have on that migration. So when Nalcor finally released its environmental impact study last month, I was going through it for my client, and of course the part I went to immediately was on salmon migration, and I noticed that Nalcor only devoted about a page and a half to it and said, well, there is a theory that salmon and other animals use electromagnetic fields to orient themselves for their migration, but we don't know if that theory really holds up, and that's that. And while I was just checking a few details on that, on the material they were citing, running it through Google, I discovered that, oh my gosh, it was word for word the same as a manual for how to do environmental assessment of offshore oil and gas exploration.
Why are these similarities in both the reports that you found? Why are they a concern for you?
Well, first of all, your listeners should realize when I say word for word the same, I'm not talking about a sentence here, a sentence there. I'm talking about paragraphs and paragraphs. And in the case of the study of, the discussion of the effects on marine mammals, I'm talking about a page and a half straight that are word for word the same. Except that, first of all, whenever the manual says, well, there really is something to this theory, that if you interfere with electromagnetic fields, you'll interfere with migration, that's the only place where Nalcor changes the text very much. That the reason that it's important is because, honestly, the work Nalcor did for its environmental impact statement on the dams was not particularly good. I think they had well over 150 requests by the Joint Review Panel for more information, and that's why it took almost 2 years to get from the study to a hearing. When you've been asked, as Nalcor was, to discuss this issue, it seems to me you don't just cut and paste the same words that would apply for anybody doing anything on the ocean floor.
So you found this Texan oil and gas exploration manual on Google?
Yeah, honestly, I needed to know how to translate a phrase into French, and when I ran the phrase through Google, I found the manual, and it's the same. There's paragraph after paragraph that are word for word the same. There's as I said, there's a page and a half there. I mean, my client's initial concern is Atlantic salmon migration, but obviously there's an issue about whales and other mammals. That goes on for a page and a half, the same, word for word the same, except that at the very end, Nalcor tacks on an extra sentence saying there's probably not much to worry about. question is, where's the actual environmental impact study if you're just cutting and pasting general statements? There's an actual area here, and it's called the Strait of Belle Isle. And there's an actual population here, and it's the Atlantic salmon that go through the Strait of Belle Isle and come to the salmon rivers of the lower North Shore. Where's the study of those species in that location if you can just cut and paste pages from another book that is meant for anybody who does oil and gas in an offshore area anywhere?
Now, Nalcor has offered an explanation to this. It says that both the Texas report and the Lower Churchill report had the same author, and this explains those similarities. Does this, alleviate your concerns?
No, because that was pretty obvious. I mean, the manual in Texas was written for them by a consulting firm in St. John's, so I figured that Nalcor had used that same firm. But that means somebody just thought it was good enough you can say you're studying the effects of an entirely new development on the Strait of Belle Isle by just using the same pages that would give instructions to anybody who pretty much wanted to do anything on the ocean floor anywhere. Does that sound like an environmental impact study to you? Sounds to me like a textbook.
So what would you like to see happen here?
I'd like to see Nalcor take its job seriously. Its job is it's proposing something that hasn't been done before. I think it needs to look at it, and I don't think I'll come back to this. It's not an exact cut and paste because every now and then they'll leave something out. I mean, for instance, that manual leaves out a paragraph that says. The manual rather has a paragraph that says that there's a lot of studies to say that salmon do use what's they call magnetoreception. I'm not a biologist, by the way, but magnetoreception meaning they have a physical ability to use magnetic fields to figure out where they are and and carry out the migration that's part of their life cycle. That's a paragraph in this manual.
All right.
That paragraph's not there, but there are Atlantic salmon in the Strait of Belle Isle. So the fact that Nalcor is willing to cut and paste but drop key paragraphs that don't help it make me think this isn't an environmental impact study. This is just getting rid of an issue so they can move on.
All right, David, we're going to move on now and hear from Nalcor. I want to thank you very much for your time.
It's my pleasure. Thanks.
David Schultz is a lawyer representing the Iqaluit Innu. On the line now is Gilbert Bennett, Nalcor's Vice President for Lower Churchill. Mr. Bennett, good morning.
Hi, good morning, Colleen.
So can you explain why so many sections of this environmental impact statement seems to be taken, word for word from these Texas oil and gas exploration manuals?
Well, I think it's important to clarify that the source material is not from those documents. The underlying work that's been done by our consultant here, who has a background and expertise in marine biology and environmental assessment, was the originator of source material that was used in both documents. So we didn't cut and paste from that Houston product. We took a report prepared by our consultant.
So even if it is the same author, the environmental situations obviously must be very different in Texas compared to Labrador. How can we trust this work given in all this similar language?
Yeah, well, let's look at the process. The work that was done by our consultant was speaking to the effects of magnetic fields on various species of fish and other animals, and we need to take that information and look at it in the context of the specific situation in the Strait of Belle Isle. So if we look at this from an engineering perspective, the submarine cables create a magnetic field. We look at the magnitude of that magnetic field. We consider that effect in comparison to the natural magnetic fields that are there, the variations in fields that take place in the environment, and then we can draw conclusions on the effects that the project are going to have in that environment. And that's done in the EIS in great detail.
So even if these two reports are by the same consultant, do you think it's professional for that person to use so much of the same wording in two very different reports?
Well, the reports are on the same issue, okay, the effect of magnetic fields on various species. So it's the same topic being investigated in both cases. Now, the application of that information in the specific environment and the specific conditions, of course, are very different. And that's covered in our EIS in great detail. And we take many pages to talk about the field calculations and what the environment looks like in the Strait of Belle Isle.
What did you think of David Schultz's comments?
Well, I think that there are, he's entitled to, to his opinion, and we certainly, appreciate that feedback. But I think it's important to look at the broader context here. We're in a review of the environmental impact statement. We're undergoing consultation activities with a variety of groups, including an event with his community this evening. So we're in a process where we're taking feedback. If there are questions, we'll address those. We'll bring in our consultants and experts as appropriate to deal with these questions in more detail. So this is a normal part of the process from our perspective.
So tonight's meeting is about this issue?
If the community wishes to speak about that, we'll be able to talk to it and explain in more detail how we looked at the conditions in the Strait of Belle Isle and reach the conclusions that we did.
Do you understand why the Aniquishit are skeptical of this report?
I think the skepticism of the report it needs to be put in context. And I think this is part of the process as well, is explaining how we look at the material that was provided by our consultant and how we apply it to the specific situation. And I can appreciate that there is a large volume of material in the environmental assessment. The EIS itself is over 2,000 pages, and there are thousands and thousands of pages of more detailed background information along with the EIS. So I think it's I can appreciate that it may be difficult to put all this material in context, and we're happy to help out with that.
Gilbert, I want to thank you for your time this morning.
Thanks so much, Colleen.
Gilbert Bennett is the Vice President of Lower Churchill at Nalcor.